Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this fourth and final talk in our series of webinars for this year. I'm Jeremy Cockcroft. I'm on the CIBSE Scotland committee. The topic this time is Chain of Infection, a reservoir of organisms. So that's the title. So obviously this talk is going to be all about water safety. Now we've got Pete Tyson here. He's from the Water Hygiene Centre, and he's going to describe a systematic approach to identifying and eliminating pathogens that thrive in our water systems. Pete's got 20 years of experience in the water hygiene industry in many roles, ranging from service engineer all the way up to regional director level, and I'm sure he'll cover that in his talk. After which we will have some time for questions. So please type your question as succinctly as you can, please, into the chat window. That's you'll get that to open by clicking on the little speech bubble in the main screen, and we'll pick out the questions at the end for Pete to address. This presentation is being recorded, so if you want to review the talk again, we'll arrange that can be done. Okay, so without further ado, I'll hand over to Pete.
Brilliant, thank you, Jeremy. Thanks everybody for spending the time to listen to me. I have got man flu, so I do apologise if my voice is a little bit croaky. I may need to cough every so often. But today's presentation really is about, it's a presentation put together by the Water Hygiene Centre, and what it is predominantly involving is NHS trusts, and the photographs are predominantly from NHS trusts. But some of the issues that the NHS trusts find and see can easily be transferred across many other different sort of market sectors within the working environment. So what I wanted to do today really was just to, and Jeremy there mentioned the different market sectors of my different roles really. So I've been in the industry for 20 odd years now. It's now 25 years, which is, every time I have to say that, it makes me feel older and older. But it's from a service engineer, so looking after cooling towers, steam boilers, water hygiene contracts, for example, from domestic water hygiene systems, through to sort of hyperbolic cooling towers from power stations and such, and everything in between. And one of the things that we see on a regular basis is sort of different sort of areas of infection and how things get contaminated and how things then are then managed on an ongoing basis. So what I want to do really is start up with saying that we're all familiar with sort of TVCs, total viable counts, legionella, Pseudomonas Aerogenosa, for example, and there are other waterborne pathogens which are becoming more interesting. Cuprivardis, for example, which has been identified in recent years. And one of the things that, and I don't want to mention the word COVID at the minute, but COVID is a relatively new bacteria or strain of virus, and we don't know an awful lot about it. But bearing in mind that legionella, for example, was identified in 1976 and the phrase was coined in 1977, we still don't know an awful lot about legionella bacteria, and we definitely don't know an awful lot about Pseudomonas bacteria. It's still relatively young, and it's sort of a knowledge breakdown of what it is, what it does, and we're continually developing and identifying new strains of legionella bacteria, for example. But what I wanted to do really was, the title being Chain of Infection, Reservoir of Organisms, and it's of worthy note that the World Health Organization details that almost 2 billion people depend on healthcare facilities with no water. And worldwide, there's 1 in 4 healthcare facilities that's got no water, but no water services. And there's 1 in 3 does not have access to hand hygiene where care is provided. 1 in 10 has no sanitation services, and 1 in 3 does not segregate waste safely. So in the world's 47 least developed countries, 1 in 2 healthcare facilities does not have basic drinking water. 1 in 4 healthcare facilities has no hand hygiene facilities at points of care, and 3 in 5 lack basic sanitation services. I suppose with this in mind, what is an infection? Well, a nosocomial infection, which is also called hospital-acquired infection, can be defined as an infection acquired in hospital by a patient who was admitted for a reason other than that infection. So quite straightforward, really. If you go into hospital, you've currently got an infection and you acquire another infection whilst in hospital. That's called nosocomial hospital-acquired infection. So for clarity on the terms, the healthcare-associated infection or hospital-acquired infection and nosocomial are interchangeable. So the World Health Organization in 2016 issued guidelines on core components of infection prevention and control, and at the national and acute healthcare facility level. So in the report, it states that healthcare associated infections, HAIs, are one of the most common adverse events in care delivery and are an endemic burden coupled with epidemics, i.e. coronavirus, and they are major public health problems. So sticking with HAIs, how much of a problem are they? Well, in May 2011, the World Health Organization again issued a report on the burden of endemic healthcare associated infection worldwide, summarising in a WHO fact sheet, and these being that of every 100 hospitalised patients at any given time, 7 in developed and 10 in developing countries will acquire at least one healthcare associated infection. At any given time, the prevalence of HAI in developed countries varies between 3.5 and 12%. And the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control estimates that 4.1 million patients are affected by approximately 4.5 million episodes of HAI every year. Approximately 30% of patients in ICUs are affected by at least one episode of HAI. And the longer patients stay in an ICU, for example, the more at risk they become of acquiring an infection. And high frequency of infections associated with the use of invasive devices, in particular central lines, urinary catheters and ventilators, for example. So for an infection to occur, there needs to be 3 sort of key elements. So there's got to be a presence of a microorganism, there's got to be an immunocompromised patient, and there's got to be some transmission. So over the next few slides, we'll take a look at each of these in contributing factors in a bit more detail. So if we start with immunocompromised patients, it's fair to say we do know a little about types of patients and their susceptibility. So healthy people may develop Legionnaires disease, and there are a number of factors that increase susceptibility. So newborn babies, neonates, increasing in age greater than 50. I'm not suggesting that's old, but that's the age that's been given. Men, approximately 3 times more likely than women. I've got a the discussion point on that is that, is there a physiological reason why there's 3 times more likely, or is it just that in historical locations there was more men, there was I suppose in that working environment where there's more cooling towers, for example, to then therefore affect those potentially immunosuppressed personnel. So that's I'm expecting that to even out over the next few years, in fairness. Those that have got existing respiratory disease that makes the lungs more vulnerable to infection, illnesses and underlying health conditions, whether it be cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, or alcoholism, smoking, obviously lung capacity is compromised, heavy cigarette smoking, for example, probability of impaired lung function, and patients who are immunocompromised as a result of illness or treatment, those on immunosuppressant drugs that inhibit the body's natural defences against infection. I'm sure we've all got some experience with Legionella, and it's been around for over 40 years, as I mentioned earlier. And guidance on the management has been nearly that sort of long as well. So thinking about Legionella, who do we know are susceptible? And those are the people. But there is data from the Public Health England showing that the relationship between people who caught Legionella disease and underlying conditions. So this is across 2012 to 2016. And as we can see, looking at any underlying condition, 2/3 of people who caught Legionella disease had something wrong with them. 33% were smokers, 29% had heart conditions, and 15% had diabetes. So in 2012, an outbreak of Legionella disease in Edinburgh, 56 confirmed cases and 36 probable and possible cases linked to this outbreak. And there was unfortunately 4 deaths reported amongst the confirmed cases. A report on the underlying detail on the outbreak detailing underlying conditions among the confirmed cases. So these 70% had a serious underlying medical condition, 25% had a condition or were on treatment that was likely to result in immunosuppression, 16% were diabetic, 79% were reported to be current smokers, compared with 19% in the overall Lothian population, and 9% were reported to have excess alcohol consumption based on a clinical assessment of alcohol consumption greater than 21 units per week for males and 14 units for females. So let's now see, by the way, there was nobody identified. The actual identification of the suspected cooling system wasn't identified. I don't know whether anybody's aware of that, but it was the one sort of outbreak that was never really pinpointed to a specific location. And there's there's various discussions around how and why that occurred and what the actions are on the back of it. So let's now consider another waterborne pathogen. So Pseudomonas Aerogenosa, for example. And HTMO4 details those in augmented care are the most susceptible. And there is no fixed definition of augmented care at the moment, but most care that is designated as augmented will be that where medical and nursing procedures render the patient susceptible to invasive disease from environmental or opportunistic pathogens such as Pseudomonas aeruginosa and other sorts of organisms. And broadly, they include critical care, adult, paediatric and neonatal, renal, respiratory, including cystic fibrosis, ICU and ITU. So again, Public Health England issue an annual data report on PSA bacteremia, and the last updated report issued in December 2020 had data extracted from PHE's data capture system on 23rd of June 2020. And that data reported that 146 acute trusts and 191 CCGs, and the annual counts and rates being 2017 to 2018 was 4,305, 2018 to 2019 was 4,186, 2019 to 2020 was 4,336. So we've just considered two types of waterborne pathogens there, Legionella and Pseudomonas aerugenosa. And as we can already determine, those susceptible to these pathogens and how they could be infected. And as noted at the beginning, 30% of ICU patients will pick up an HAI. So we know we've got an immunocompromised sort of patient or number of patients. So let's take a look at the transmission of pathogens between staff and patients and also among patients. So the chain of infection, now this starts the transmission of pathogens between staff and patients. So how do people come into contact with these pathogens? And the pathogens need to be transmitted, but the 2011 World Health Organization report identified the following transmission pathways, and they are ingestion, inhalation, aspiration, or contact. So HTMO401 Part C for Pseudomonas, used to be the addendum, but it got amalgamated into the HTMO401, provides a steer on transmission and contact. So that's first being direct contact. So that's ingestion, bathing, contact with mucous membranes or surgical sites, splashing from water outlets or basins when outlet is run. And the splashing element is a real hot topic at the moment, and has been for a bit of time really. And studies have been carried out by various agencies and bodies, such as the PHE, and the studies continue. But with splashing, what is in the drain or end of the tap? Can that be propelled through the air and land outside the basin area and onto a person, be it staff, visitor or patient? Therefore, we have contact. So on the right-hand side there, this has been some a fluorescent dye has been introduced to the water system. The outlet has been run, and obviously you can see various locations and splash where that water droplet has managed to travel to, and it's a bit of a distance really. But bearing in mind that that drain potentially contains Pseudomonas aeruginosa, if that is splashing back up, could it make contact with the outlet of the tap? Yeah, of course it could. So we've got an issue with location of drain potentially, splash back onto the actual tap outlet. Can it then start to grow within the tertiary loops of the system? But you've also got the contact from the actual drain onto people, and so a number of issues there that need to be taken into consideration. So the PHE have suggested that the transmission of that water, or the distance that water can travel, it can be up to 2 meters from the basin. The second sort of section there is indirect contact. So inhalation of aerosols within the room, inhalation of aerosols from respiratory equipment, for example, devices that produce an aerosol or open suctioning of wound irrigation, medical devices, equipment, rinse with contaminated water, HCW hands following washing in contaminated water from surfaces or from contaminated equipment, reusable wash bowls, for example. You've got retrograde contamination, which is patient carrier to the outlet next to the patient in the room, or cleanliness of tools, for example, from equipment of those who install, fit, maintain the water fittings, for example. So there's this particular photograph that, is the equipment that's being used sterile? Is it it's been put onto the floor? Should it be on a sterile tray? Should it be cleaned and disinfected prior to use? So the final element really is the presence of the microorganisms in the hospital environment. So just a moment ago we saw this slide, the World Health Organization in 2011, and we can see the rest of the slide, or the rest of the detail, being the pathogens that are present. And bacteria such as E. coli, legionella, mycobacterium. Yeah, since 2011 we've added a few more. As I mentioned before, PSA from 2012 with the outbreak in Belfast, and Cuprivardis in recent years from the Glasgow NHS Trust. So a little bit of background into sort of Cuprivardis in Glasgow, the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, which opened in June 2015. So very early on, there were concerns about infections emerging in the patients. An inquiry was commissioned. The report was published in June 2020. The report runs to 227 pages with 63 recommendations. Some of those findings were the governance of the project during design, build, commissioning and maintenance did not adequately take account of the scale and complexity and specialist nature of the building project. The project would have benefited from greater sort of external expertise and greater uptake of internal available expertise to support decision making on the water and air ventilation systems at key points in the design, the build and also the commissioning phases. Some of the difficulties encountered with water and ventilation systems were the result of ambiguity concerning the status and their interpretation of guidance. So from what I can read between the lines there, that there was a project that was undertaken. They didn't gather the relevant experts within that field, so I don't think there was an authorised engineer, I don't think there was a water safety group that were involved, and I think that the project went ahead without sort of it having a sort of a liaison with the water safety group and any particular experts within the field who could maybe help and assist and sort that sort of initial phase out of the design and the build, which is very, very common. And it's one of the things that we come across on a regular basis, that trying to educate the sort of architects and design stages is quite difficult. And it's more or less once you've got the problem, then you've got to manage that problem. It's been much, in my opinion, it's much better if we can try and manage that and engineer that problem out as early as possible to try and increase the efficacy of the program or the installation and ongoing maintenance of it. So from a cost perspective, we know we can't eliminate Legionella because we know it's a naturally occurring organism. It's ubiquitous. It's appearing to be everywhere. It's in rivers, lakes, reservoirs, streams. And cost to control substances hazardous to health looks to firstly eliminate, which we can't. So what can we do? We try and control. So we can't remove our flora or fauna. We can't remove existing water systems installations. We can't remove the use of water. So as such, to comply with cost, we need to control it. And as I mentioned, it's a naturally occurring organism. And given the right conditions, it will multiply. It will multiply, asexually. And again, like I say, it can grow and multiply and proliferate into some large numbers. And just because we've got sort of fluorescence Legionella, for example, or another type of Legionella, it doesn't mean that we can't grow and proliferate Legionella serogroup 1, which is the one that's identified of causing Legionnaires' disease. So we know it's in the mains cold water, so the actual utility companies don't send us sterile water, and the mains cold water distribution is not free from dead ends, biofilms or any cracks, and it's a very potential source for microorganisms to be present. So a typical sort of water system where mains cold water enters our properties, and once inside our properties, it's our responsibility to manage the water and the system to prevent the proliferation of microorganisms. So the utility providers provide us with wholesome, potable quality supply. We know we can drink Legionella bacteria. There's no risk of inhalation of the water when it's being provided from a wholesome, potable supply. It's when it gets into our properties that we decide to put it into a cold water storage tank. We increase the potential for stagnation. We increase the potential for the right temperatures, the right nutrients, the right food sources, and then we also put it into a potential aerosol by putting it into showers or any sort of system where the water surface tension is broken can produce an aerosol, which then can unfortunately be inhaled. And if it does contain Legionella bacteria, for example, and that is a susceptible person, can produce some contamination of Legionnaires' disease, for example. So what might we have within our building? So we've got cold water storage tanks, we've got hot water generators, and we've got distribution systems. So I've got some sort of photographs that we've come across over the many years and what we've seen and what we've found, and a few examples of what issues may exist with these systems. So cold water storage tanks, for example, they may be oversized, so poor turnover, they may be poorly configured, they may be gaining heat. So this particular one on the left hand side, that looks to be, it's in a room space. It's in a room space that is surrounded by glass. I would imagine that would get quite warm in that sort of area in the summer months. I'm also thinking that that's not got particularly great access to be able to clean and disinfect, to perform inspections. So for me, that cold water storage tank is in a bit of a poor shape. But this cold water storage tank here has also got a dead bird in it. It's got some sediment. We've got some what looks like to be insulation. We've got some contaminated water on the right hand side. We've got some dead legs, and we've got some dead ends or blind ends. And then on the right hand side, we've got some probably what I would call as infrequently used outlets or little used outlets. The term that we tend to use nowadays is infrequently used outlets. So we've got some areas there of concern, but that again is not an uncommon sort of practice. So from a cold water storage tank, we've also got hot water generators and an undersizing, so not achieving temperatures, not set at the right temperature, for example, or poorly configured. And distribution systems where we've got cut off ends, little used outlets, infrequently used outlets, poorly configured, gaining heat due to lack of insulation, for example. All sort of areas where we come across on a regular basis. So let's get to the outlets. So let's have a look at this one. We've got two. So we've got a Belfast sink and a washhand basin. Looks like we've got a TMV there, but we've also got a TMT here. So we've got a thermostatic mixing tap, but we've got a TMV feeding the hot supply to the TMT. So we don't really need that, do we? And the question would be, do we really need this whole system here when we've got a washhand basin there of hot and cold? I don't know. What we need to do there is a risk assessment led approach to the use of water within that facility. Sometimes we just overspec and overspecify equipment because we may or may not need it, but it can cause us a problem further down the line. Okay, drains. Where the water does not flow free down the drain, this can splash back and cause a biofilm to develop. And where water can be trapped and gurgle and spurt back out. So coupled with the biofilm or water from within the trap. Strainers and filters, for example, become areas where biofilm can be established, and non-RAS approved materials, potential nutrient for biofilm and bacteria. So these flexible hoses have actually been identified as harbouring legionella bacteria within the rubber internals. And the recommendation from all HTM from the gentleman, Dr. Tom Makin, who helped write the approved code of practice. I think he did well, somebody else did a study on it, but he realised that the actual study was genuine and had all of his sites flexible hoses removed and hard plumbed in. So that was over 2,000 flexible hoses they had to have hard plumbed in going forward. So there's some not very nice conditioned systems in this particular photograph suite, and you wouldn't be too happy with the majority of those photographs. So, you know, we need to make sure that the cleans and disinfections of the shower heads and hoses. So a lot of common misconception is that we just need to do the hose. Sorry, we just need to do the shower head, whereas actually we need to do the hose as well. Again, so if you are in charge of any site, or you are in that sort of industry, then just make sure that people who are doing the work do actually do the hoses as well. But what I've done over the last few slides, I've shared examples of reservoirs for microorganisms to grow. There are many more for sure, and this was not an exhaustive list by any stretch. But let's think about this sort of about our reservoir from a human factors perspective, and that being how has the reservoir of organisms come to be? So these human factors cover all those persons who may have an impact on the water system. So these could be designers, builders, maintainers, cleaners, agency staff, patients. So let's have a look at designers and builders. And this is, you know, we can have a poor specification design, for example. We can have resulting in high inherent risk. We can have poor control of contractors and poor control of installation and no awareness of impact on components. And these include sort of clinical wash-hand basins used as urinals during construction. That is actually urine. Components not kept sealed and covered during the installation, and domestic hot water returns not installed to the specification detailed. A recent example of a new build with 150 outlets and none were installed to the specified 300mm. And what are some of the human factors that maintenance and cleaners introduce? Well, these could be incorrect components being used, poor installation of components, poor storage of materials, and incorrect processes. So, for example, strainers not being cleaned, a build-up of biofilm and bacteria, dirty tools and components being used, contamination from other sources, for example, wash basins used to store dirty mop heads in contact with the tap end, direct cross-contamination. So this particular drawing here, or this particular photograph here, whatever's been on that floor and being mopped up is now on the end of that tap. And cleaners taking the cleaning cloth from the waste aperture up to the end of the tap. A direct cross-contamination. So what is at the plug as waste is now at the end of the tap. And this still occurs, by the way. And we're authorising engineers for a number of NHS trusts, and we regularly go through with the ICP team and look at the standard operating procedure of how a cleaning procedure is in operation. They're regularly audited, and we continually still find issues with how we are cleaning rooms, for example. And then, so what are some of the human factors that H&C staff and patients introduce? So this could be, for example, pouring the wrong fluid down a wash basin, drinks, patient wash water, for example, not using particular outlets, and patients using the wash basins as urinals, as I mentioned before. And over the last few slides, I've shared examples of human factors that impact on the reservoir of organisms. There are many more, and this was not an exhaustive list. So, in essence, this really concludes the sort of presentation. So, a nosocomial infection is immunocompromised patients. It's the transmission of pathogens between staff and patients and other patients. And obviously, we've got to have a presence of microorganisms in a hospital environment. And those are sorts of the things that we come across on a regular basis. So we know that hospitals contain patients who are susceptible to infection. We know that patients are exposed to microorganisms via inhalation, aspiration, contact and ingestion. And we know that microorganisms naturally occurring, and we are not going to eliminate them. What we must do is try and control them, but a combination of favourable conditions exists for their proliferation within the water systems that we we have and we design and build, and controlling these favourable conditions will reduce infection. So I've referenced a few various organisations and their documents, and the details can be found here. I am going to send this presentation through to Jeremy, so for distribution. I think it's already been recorded anyway, Jeremy. So if you do need any of that, it's already there. And then obviously, if you wanted to receive weekly blogs on the management and control of water hygiene, please sign up to receive those weekly blogs. But we've also got a LinkedIn account, a Facebook account, and a Twitter, and we've also got some YouTube videos describing how to do things such as taking samples, flushing, clarifier inspections, flushing little used outlets, for example. And that is the end of the slideshow. So what I'll do is, if it's okay with you, do you want me to stay on any particular slide, Jeremy?
Nothing. Thanks. Thanks very much for your talk. That's quite scary, I have to say. I don't think I'm going to be avoiding any hospital stays for a while, but hopefully you've stimulated some, I've stimulated some action to try and take, control some of these aspects of water quality. I'm looking now in the chat box. We don't have many questions, so anyone who has a question to ask, please use the chat box. We've got one question, however, so maybe you could address it. The question is, what about toilet flushing? I think this probably is in relation to splashing and the issues you had there relating to a wash hand basin.
Absolutely, very, very similar. If anybody watched, there was a program that was looking at the splash and looking at the aerosolization of a flush of a toilet, and the aerosol and also the splash can travel for up to 8 meters in when a toilet is flushed because of the force of the flush, for example. And I don't know about you, but I know I don't have an 8 meter long bathroom, so I'm now thinking to myself that toilet lid needs to be shut before I flush. And it is a common recommendation now that's being seen on a lot of facilities, that is their advice. Again, that's been highlighted due to again, I don't want to mention COVID again, but it was one of the issues that was arisen through COVID, that flushing of toilets needed to be performed with the toilet seat down. But in answer to, have I answered the question there, Jeremy, or not?
I think so, yes. From
a Legionella water hygiene monitoring program, they should be flushed on a regular basis as well. If, for example, you're working on from a skeleton staff, or you want to include it in a flushing program, a WC should be used. Okay,
we've got a few questions coming in now. Richard Downs is saying that hand dryers are also an issue. He's saying there has been a study showing a very wide spray area if dirty hands are put into them.
That's right. Yeah, I think Dyson did a study on there, or somebody did a study on the Dyson. Yes, the Dyson blade. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, someone else has mentioned that here. Yeah. Okay. And then related to the toilet flushing, many hospital toilets don't have a lid.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's called a flush and run.
Flush and run, right. Right, I'm just waiting to see if any more questions come up. It's interesting what you were saying about, these bacteria and so forth are present even in our water supply as delivered from the reservoirs. Is there any action taken by the water supply industry to to try and improve that?
Well, there was.
I mean, I know we have chlorine or fluorine in our water supply as it is. Is this not enough to?
Not to make it sterile, no. Unfortunately, there was a big chatter about. I did a bit of work at a site in Manchester, UU facility in Manchester, and we were contemplating putting various other different sort of treatment programs in place. They looked at chlorine dioxide, they looked at various other sort of methodologies of disinfection or filtration, but because the cost implication was so high, it was the risk assessment approach was that there's not enough damage being caused for them to do something about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's one of the things that we as an organization, and I'll give you an example, to be fair, Jeremy. So in 2017, the Netherlands had the year of legionella. So every year they have a year of a particular bacteria. And in 2017, it was the year of legionella, and they ramped up their sort of testing procedures. So anybody who was suspected or potential had also showing signs or symptoms of Legionella disease, they were tested. And I think that the Netherlands have a population of about 17 million. The UK have a population of about 67 million, something like that. But they had more cases in 2017 than we had in 2017. Yet we've got 4 times more population.
Mm. And
they've got, don't get me wrong, they've still got some legislation that it's not quite as good as ours, but they have still got some legislation. And it just goes to show that the more you test for it, the more you find. And I think that if we tested for it more readily, more frequently, I think there'd be more cases identified. And whether that be from a hospital, whether it be from a domestic system at your own property, I don't know. It could be anywhere. But you know, I suspect that more domestic properties have more cases from them than water treatment cooling systems, for example.
Right. You didn't mention it, but I believe you have a blog on your website about domestic water quality, particularly in relation to more homeworking and so forth.
Well, absolutely, yeah. The risk from your, well, there's twofold there. There's the risk from your domestic property at home. However, you're going to be increasing the frequency of the use of it because you're not going to be out at work. But then you've got an issue with the going back to work. So I wrote an article for the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, or co-authored an article for it about going back to work after the first lockdown 1.0 back in March 2020. So within a 6 or 7 weeks, I was asked to write an article about returning back to work and what would be the issues returning back to work with Legionella management, etc., etc. And obviously, some places they shut up the shop, some just switched off the lights and went home, and some had a skeleton staff, some had, you know, a full workforce. So there was a varying sort of mix of advice in relation to what to do when you go back into work if your workforce has been predominantly working from home, for example. So what you should have done, or what people should have done, and you know, at the time you weren't thinking about this, and nobody probably was. You know, how can we make sure that water system is being used as it should, or how it was designed to be used, rather than what it is being used for right now. So the increase in usage should have been there. That increase in flushing, increase in maintenance, increase in sort of inspections, for example. So how could we make sure that water that was installed, or that water system, was being used as it was designed?
Right. Okay, another question from Anna Martin, who happens to work for the NHS. What about dental water lines? Dental water lines.
Yeah.
Usually flushed with the water and disinfectant, but should they be intermittently cleaned and disinfected in the same way as a shower head?
Yeah, they've got their own. I think, if I remember right, they've got their own accidental technical memorandum there, but they should also be using a 5-way reverse osmosis filtered water. So no bacteria should be able to get through that system. So that water supply should be filtered by a 5-stage reverse osmosis filter. And they've got their own flushing, how often they do the cleans. In fact, I think it's twice a day they do the line disinfection.
Right.
But they've got, if you just bear with me 1 sec, I just come after this. Just bear with me 1 second, I'll see what I've got on that. Oops, somebody's already beat me to it, I think. Yeah, I know. I think they are. You're right. I think they are regularly disinfected. I think that again is pretty much doing what it's the equivalent of what they're doing from the showerhead perspective. But I think they do it twice a day.
Right.
If I can find this information, I will reference it.
Okay. Another question. There is an updated. This is Mike Smith. There is an updated NHS Property Services Technical Guidance Note, TG03, from September 2021, which looks at the standard specification for water system fittings and components.
Absolutely, it's a nice document.
Yeah. So that's something you would recommend anyone involved
to review. Yes,
should look at that. Okay. Well, if we've no more questions, I don't see any more coming up. You must have covered the subject very comprehensively. Oh, wait a minute. That's okay. It's just somebody's leaving the meeting. So I'd like to thank you, Pete, for your time. I think that was quite an interesting talk and given us, anyone involved in this business, quite a lot to think about and to be aware of. I should just say, as I said, that we'll get the recording probably onto the CIBSE Scotland webpage, which you can find quite easily in our past presentation section. That's where I hope it will. If it doesn't end up there, there'll be a reference to it from there. So that's the intention. And just to say that this is the last seminar for this year, but obviously we'll be looking to start up again in the new year. If anyone has any topics they would like us to look at covering, please send me an email, and we'll see what we can come up with. Okay, well, thank you, Pete.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for sticking awake.
Thank you all for attending and supporting CIBSE Scotland. It was a very good turnout today. I think we had more than 50 people at one point signed in, and I look forward to the next webinar. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.